I am Dr. Mitch Harlan, and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. Hi, I'm Dr. Mitch Harlan, and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. I'm here with Efrain, and Efrain's story is powerful, extremely powerful. We're so honored to have you on here today. We're going to talk about being involved in a gang.
Well, I'm glad to be here, actually, and I'm kind of excited to do this. So,
I'm super stoked. We've talked before. Your story is incredible. We're going to jump right into the story, man. We're going to talk about kind of how it all started to evolve, where you were at. We believe here at Truth Talks that this is one of those situations where your story is going to save a lot of people from getting into that lifestyle, perhaps different choices that you would have made. And at the end of it, it's a really good feel-good story. It's a lot of a faith-based story, which we're always excited to have on because we have a lot of those. So I want to jump right into it. You know how I know where you're from?
Yeah, I believe I do.
It's tattooed on the back of your head. So Oxnard, California, That's where you grew up. And then I'm going to let you take it from here.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Oxnard, California, and I loved it. It's a city by the sea. So it's beautiful. But yeah, I don't know. It's a crazy story how I ended up here in Colorado. It's brought me to a crazy place. But yeah, I was young and born and raised in Oxnard, and I was in church. Raised in church and.
And went to a Christian school.
Yes, I went to a Christian school, which is, crazy in itself. I think where this story kind of unfolds is when the school closed down and I wasn't able to go to that Christian school anymore. I got put into public school, so it's a big difference, a big culture shock. When you go from being raised in that church environment to, I was still being raised in church, but I was, exposed to the world at that time, so it's pretty crazy just how that, you kind of feel alienated is what happened. I kind of felt alone. So then I would, I guess what happened is I wanted to kind of fit in, so that's how it kind of began. I started seeing different individuals that I would hang around with, and I would have fun, but we were getting in trouble doing things that I was never doing before.
Well, what we mentioned before as I was watching this is TED Talk by one of the MS-13 gang guys, and he said the exact same thing you just said. He started feeling alienated, and so when he got around these people, all of a sudden he felt a belonging and a sense of belonging. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I would say that's exactly how it felt. Just, you feel like you feel wanted, and it's not that I wasn't wanted, you know what I mean? It's not like my mother didn't want me, but it just, when you're going to a school and you're alone and then all of a sudden you have this group, while you feel, you feel like, okay, I'm a part of something, okay, it's not that bad, and slowly that's who you associate with. It could lead you into some pretty dark places.
Which we're heading down that road. So you were pretty much raised by your mom, though?
Yes.
Yeah. Dad wasn't part of the picture much?
Not much. He was around here and there, but not very much. It was mainly my mom.
Who prayed for you every day. We talked about that.
Yes.
At the end, that becomes really important. But Dad, did he get hooked up in gangs?
I wouldn't say that he was really hooked up in gangs, no. He was a fisherman, actually, but I think his thing was he was on drugs a lot, so he wasn't. I didn't always see him. I wasn't, and when I did see him, it was, sporadic, in and out.
Do you think the lack of because this is a big topic that comes up. Do you think a lack of a father figure, would that have changed?
I was always longing for it. So I would say, yeah, it would make a difference, definitely.
Yeah. Now your uncles were part of it.
Oh yeah, I mean the crazy thing is on my dad's side, I was the first grandchild, so I was like the oldest. So what happened was I was like raised by a lot of my uncles, and so that was another part that kind of led to how I was too.
Right, because they were involved.
Yeah, well, not only that, it was a, you know, kind of a big party life, and it's not to talk down to my family or
No.
anything like that, families, and that's what I looked up to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It wasn't that they were living their lives and I was just right there in the midst of it.
But that also kind of paints that picture, right? It's like, okay, well, because you're young. You're young at this point,
Yeah.
right? It was about 14.
Yeah, about 13, 14 years old.
And then when did you actually get involved with the gang activity? Was that at that same exact age?
It was it was just it kind of came in a little bit of a wave type. Just because when I was living with my mother, I started hanging around them individuals, and then, we just hung out, smoked weed and drank and did those things. But my mother, she knew what was going on. She wasn't dumb. So she sent me once to live with my grandmother where my father was and stuff. And I kind of started hanging around same type of individuals over there,
Right.
Which was in different parts of California,
So again, it seems like at that point it just kind of catches you everywhere you go.
Yeah, it's pretty, if you're already used to hanging around them type of individuals, then you're going to flock, you kind of flock to that same type of individual. You're just a troublemaker and you're causing problems and being mouthy in class and all that. And so that's kind of how it went back and forth. I moved, I want to say 3 different times back and forth until finally the last time, then I moved. All this time, I was hanging around them type of individuals, and I considered myself to start being a gang, you know what I mean?
Right.
And started getting into that, and then the kind of more activity, you know what I mean, doing things and just stuff that I shouldn't have been doing.
Because you know what's fascinating, the moment that I met you, we talked about this. The moment I met you, I'm like, this piece does not fit this puzzle. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, this is like the nicest guy ever, biggest heart ever. Would you say that the majority of your issue was environment? If not totally.
I would say so, but the issue was too is I put myself in the environment.
I get it. And personal responsibility is well respected.
Yeah.
It is.
But
It doesn't fit you.
well, and it doesn't. 100% it doesn't, and it's not who I was. That whole time, that whole part of my life, I was living a lie. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In the sense that I was trying to fit in, so I was trying to make myself look a certain way and be a certain way when that's just not who I was.
Because I'm just going to throw it out here. You've done bad things and seen a lot of bad things.
Oh, yeah.
And yet, when we had talked before, there was something that you said to me that I thought was so powerful. That was more on the skin because the inside didn't feel that way. Mm-hmm. Even doing some of those things, you were like, that wasn't who you are.
Yeah.
So the whole reason I thought the story was going to be so powerful is I think in the current environment we're in today, a lot of these kids are just following people, and they're going to get themselves in trouble. And I hope after the end of your story that, man, they can escape a lot of that, because once you told me that, then the puzzle piece fit. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, I totally see how that ended up happening, right?
Yeah.
So you get involved in this gang, and you're 14 years of age, and it starts to get kind of heated, more things going on. But part of the problem was drugs, right?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
I believe that was like the main issue. You know what I mean? When you're hanging around the gang and stuff like that, that's a lot of, you smoke weed, you do drugs, you get drunk, you do those type of things. So that was a lot of the draw too, because I had been doing those things. So it started drawing me even more closer to them just because that's what it was. You know what I mean?
Right.
We'd, oh, let's go, we're going to throw a house party here or do this. And, and that was like the main issue. So I spent a lot of my teenage years just drunk and high and, on drugs, on different type of drugs. And, there was a couple times where it was like there was a few individuals that pretty much had to walk me home because I was I blacked out. And it wasn't on alcohol. It was, there was angel dust involved in those type of drugs. And, it was a crazy situation. And I had always been told, don't do that. Okay, we understand you smoke weed. Don't do this stuff, But eventually it always ends up, you don't have weed at the time. So what happens? It ends up being, hey,
Whatever's
I got
there.
this. Oh, well, let's try it and see what happens.
But you'd said that man, there were times when it was every day, all day.
Oh, yeah. There had come times when I started messing with meth that's what it became. I became so addicted to it and just pretty much just all I was a dope fiend at that time. You know what I mean? It was every day that's what I wanted to do, and that's all I did.
How'd you feel about yourself? Like if you see yourself in the mirror at that point, I mean, was it just accepting because you were just kind of like, this is where I'm at right now? Or did you have this nagging feeling like, wait a minute, this isn't me, man?
Well, there was points where, yeah, but I would be so gone. It was just like I would avoid mirrors. You know what I mean? And it's funny you say that because like one of my aunts would always tell me, go look at yourself in the mirror. Go look at yourself. And it was true because I was so sucked up. My clothes barely fit me. They were hanging off me because I was so skinny, and it was bad.
But you never really wanted to look at that. It was easier to avoid it.
Yeah, it's easy to avoid and then just go get high and kind of forget about it, and, until you start coming down. And then it's like, man.
During that time in your life, would you have done anything? Like, if they'd have told you to go do anything, would you have done it at that point?
To a certain extent. That's what it was, you know what I mean? But as we talked before, I always had uncles and aunts around that were kind of always watching out for me, and it was like one time I had a gun on me, and one of my uncles seen it, and he didn't say much at the time, but I don't know, a few days later, like my dad came up to me. He's like, hey, come here, let me talk to you, and he started talking to me about that gun. He's like, hey man, I heard you had. And I was like, yeah. Well, I knew who told them, you know what I mean? But like, I wasn't mad, you know what I mean? But it was my uncle just looking out for me in a sense. And my dad's sitting there telling me like, you carry that thing, and if you pull it out, you better be ready to use it, because if not, somebody else has one and they're going to use it. You know what I mean? So there was some times, I always felt like, at the time, like, oh, I'm ready to do whatever.
But he wasn't talking from a CCW standpoint. He's talking about bad guys.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Other gang member, yes,
you
exactly.
better be ready.
Yes.
So here's a concept that I kind of struggle with after we talked for a little bit. My youngest is 12.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, he barely ties his shoes. And here you are at 14, only 2 years later, and that's a pretty rough, hard life. Do you feel like you had to grow up extremely fast?
To an extent. Like I said, though, I was always raised around my older, it was my older uncles who were young at the time, in their teens or, early 20s at the time. So I'm this youngster around all these pretty much grown folk, you know what I mean, and watching and seeing what they're doing. We learn a lot from what we see.
Absolutely.
So, and it's not to say anything bad, it wasn't just, sometimes it was even some of my cousins, I smoked my first cigarette with one of my cousins, which, it's not to say nothing bad about him.
Yeah.
But, kids experiment, you know what I mean? And if we as grown-ups ain't paying attention, things are happening and things,
That's great, because again, that's kind of the whole focus that I want to spend on this thing. It's that environment, man. We got to change the environment. But then when you talk about getting in a gang, especially a gang that's in there's a lot of bad stuff happening in it, man, you can certainly see how they go down that road. But you got hooked on all the stuff, you were doing all the stuff, and then tell me about how that started to transform into who you are today.
Well, it kind of, it's like they say, once you hit rock bottom. Well, it started spiraling out of control so much. I was just so far gone and just in that lifestyle so much, and not even the gang lifestyle, just the drug lifestyle. Being a like I said, I was pretty much just a dope fiend. That's all I was kind of focused on, and I was doing things to supply my habit, and it was spiraling out of control, and it was only a matter of time before either A, I end up dead, or B, I end up incarcerated.
Right.
And it was B. I end up doing some things and getting locked up and going to prison. And
which before we get to that, I also want to talk a little bit, because I thought it was really fascinating how I want to talk a little bit about burning bridges. When we had that discussion of, when you're in that condition, you burn bridges, but take that away from me. Tell me what it is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, before I ended up out here in Colorado, that's kind of how I felt. And that's kind of what was going on with me is I was so far strung out on drugs that, I couldn't just stay where I was staying anymore around my little cousins and around family that was seeing me like this and setting that example, and I had uncle come to me and tell me, hey, you're going to have to leave if you're going to be doing this. That's it. Yeah. And it was just kind of, it was kind of an eye opener, but it was just like, at the time it was like, oh, well, whatever then, but I was burning them bridges where I was running out of places to stay. So it was kind of pushing me in a direction, So that's how I ended up coming out to Colorado.
Right. Because, again, that seems to be that pattern, right?
Yes.
You get all involved in the drugs, and people just kind of stop giving a shit because their brains isn't where it's supposed to be, and you burn these bridges. Pretty soon, you got those choices, right? Mm-hmm. Dead or incarcerated. You come to Colorado.
And I came to Colorado, but I wasn't no changed person, I came with that same mentality, the same, I still want, I might have been dried out for a little bit, but I came out here looking to see where who was who and who I can kick back with and find the drugs, and who had, who was getting high and doing them type of things. And
you find the same people.
Oh yeah. It doesn't matter where you are. There's always those individuals, you know?
And it's almost easy to find them, right?
Oh yeah. If you're looking, you're going to find it.
Yeah. So we get messed up again in Colorado. Mm-hmm. And then what happens?
Like I said, I was out doing just dumb things, and acting tough out here, acting like I was something more than I was, and carrying a gun and doing drugs and that, and I ended up doing what it became was a first degree burglary. That's what got me caught up out here, which I wasn't even out here. I don't know. I don't even want to say I was out here 6 months. It was a few months and I was already in that type of trouble, So that's what it was. I was out doing things I shouldn't have done.
God, this is so powerful for me, because the guy you're describing, had I met you then in a convenience store, I think this is such an powerful moment for me, because it's like, we want to talk about profiling people. We want to talk about all this bullshit. I probably wouldn't have liked you then.
Oh, no. Yeah. There's not a doubt in my mind.
But now, man, I want you to come to my house and play cornhole while we're sitting out there hanging out and listening to your stories, because they're so powerful. I mean, this is what I think is the greatest message of all time is, you know what? Sometimes you earned the bullshit that you got.
Yeah.
But now you've earned the coolness and the greatness, and we're going to get to how you earned that, right? We're certainly getting to that, because that's the greatest part of the story, I think. But You come out here, you get incarcerated, and for how long?
It was an 8-year sentence, is what it was.
But there was magic in that. Because if
Oh,
it was
yeah.
only a 2-year sentence, remember what we talked about.
Oh,
Tell me
yeah,
what would
definitely.
happen if it was a 2-year.
If it was any less than what it was, I know I would have got out with the same mentality. I would have still got out and went out and did the same things I was doing because I wasn't changed yet. Nothing changed. I was still in there. I was still listening to everybody's story, and I was, we'd sit there around the table playing cards, talking about, well, yeah, when I was out there, I did this, and I was doing this, and I had this much drugs, and that's all you ever hear. You hear everybody's story, and that's what it is. But then once you get incarcerated, you don't have none of that. So even if you were the biggest drug dealer, most of the time you don't have none of what you had. It's all gone, right? So then we're all the same around this table, but we're all telling that same story, and it's just like eventually after a while, you just heard enough of them stories.
Did it kind of click? Was there a moment that it clicked for you? Or like, I don't think I want to be part of the story anymore.
One of the main points was there had been this individual that served 25 years. He was an old man already, and he came back from parole hearing, and he was like, "Yeah, man, I got paroled." All happy, and it's like, "Oh yeah, awesome." Well, he gets out on parole, and then I don't know, maybe 4 months go by, and here he comes again. And it was just like at that point, I was just like, man, I don't understand it.
Yeah. Had you already started transforming at that point? I mean, at a couple years in where you're like, all right, I don't really like this.
Well, I mean, slowly, the first couple years, though, you're just in there it's almost like camp. And I don't mean that to like sound like it's joyous, but I mean, you kind of like, that's how you program your mind, you know what I mean, to kind of deal with the situation. It's like, okay, we're just going through these motions, and we're all talking about when we get out, we're going to do this and we're going to do that.
What were those conversations like? Were they back to doing the same thing, or was it?
Well, a lot of times, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Yeah, hey, man, well, you find different people, and then they're like, hey, when I got a good connect here and I got a good this, when we get out, call me. It's a sad situation because you're just setting yourself up for failure, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're not changing your mentality.
But even a couple years into it, you still weren't completely changed.
No, because I would have got out, where I was like, okay, I'm not going to do drugs no more. But then I was like, oh, well, maybe I can just sell them if I need to make money, and I could, But it's like, why do you even want to play with fire? Because eventually you're going to get burned.
But you said drugs got into the facility.
Oh, yeah. There's always a way for everything,
Because you always hear, though, that, you get hooked on that meth, man, it's like hard to get off of. And it's a incredibly difficult journey for people to get through it. But when you go there, you're kind of forced to dry out, except for the stuff that might slip through the cracks. But we'd had a discussion, and you were kind of like, yeah, but I was kind of getting over that.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, there's always ways, and it's just, there was just this point, man, where I just knew, like, man, I can't be, and it's not to say that I didn't slip here and there in there, but when I did, I started to realize, man, I can't. If this is what it is, man, then I'm going to be here for the rest of my life pretty much.
Yeah.
Because.
But you'd also said that, with prison, and again, you didn't want to glorify it by any means, but, 3 hots and a cot was kind of almost better than the situations that you come out of.
Oh, yeah, sometimes it is. I mean, that's why I was telling you, too, we had discussed, and how I could understand how people get institutionalized, because you get out, and then there's a lot that you got to deal with. You got to find a job. You don't just have a place to live automatically. You got to find that, and then you got to pay the bills, and then you got to make sure you got food, and then, there's a lot to worry about, whereas in there,
that's exactly what Geraldo talked about. Like, he was like, you get into the gang because you're kind of lonely, or you're looking for a group of people, right? And then you go into prison, and he spent quite a few years there, and you get you get into that kind of gang mentality again, and then you get out, and it's like, oh my God, there's this crazy intense feeling of what do I do now? Did you feel that?
Oh yeah, at first, man, that's exactly how I was. Like, man, how am I gonna do this?
Yeah, I
But
can't even imagine.
it was over pretty quick though. I didn't dwell on it, and luckily, I was able just to kind of focus, and I had opportunities when I got out, so it didn't hold me back, where I know some people don't have them opportunities,
Yeah.
so it doesn't make it easy.
But man, you still got to get from that guy to this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I happen to know where it happened, but we're getting ready to talk about that right now. While you're in prison, what happens?
Well, later on in my sentence, I end up doing some things, and I end up in maximum security, 23-hour lockdown, 24 some days. But that's kind of where it took. I had more time to think and just kind of reflect on myself without a bunch of other people around. There were still people you can talk to through, across from you, or, through the vents, but it was, mainly you're just there by yourself with your own thoughts. So it was kind of at that point, of course, I had a Bible with me, so that I started reading that, and things just started clicking, and it.
You had plenty of time to read.
Oh yeah.
Did you start at Genesis and go all the way through?
Well, I actually didn't, and the thing is I would read Proverbs, and I would read that like over and over again, because I just felt like it was just showing me and telling me what I needed to do, that I needed to change, it's all wisdom.
So when you were reading that, could you start to feel that physical change?
Slowly, it was more of a mental change at first, like, okay, I'm going to do this. But then at the same time, it wasn't just, oh, I'm going to give my whole life to God,
Yeah.
It was just like, okay, I need to start living right. So that's kind of where it was, and that's where I was keeping it. Like, okay, I'm just going to live right. I'm not going to get out and do drugs. I'm not going to try to sell drugs. I'm not going to try to do this. I'm just going to get my life right.
But that was still pretty much based on what you'd been reading.
Yeah.
So it was certainly the first step towards all this recovery, right? Because you said something to me that I think was incredibly profound. You said, listen, I'm not going to church until I'm walking the right walk.
Yeah. And that's just how I've always felt. Just because, like, throughout this whole situation, like I told you, I had always felt a calling. Even when I was out there doing drugs and doing all the dumb stuff, I'd always felt something, something inside of me, And like I told you, I know there's many situations I should not have walked away from.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be here talking to you today, but I am. And if it wasn't for my mother's prayers, like I said many times, and I'll keep saying it, but if it wasn't for her prayers, I know I wouldn't have walked away from a lot of those situations.
Which she did every day.
Yeah, I know she did.
Yeah.
There's not a doubt in my mind.
And there's an awesomely cool twist to this story that you almost didn't share with me, and I had to get out of there. So you get out, you start and turn your life around. Did you screw up at all after that?
Well, I was on parole, and I was doing everything that I needed. I was working and doing all that stuff. And I had to do UAs and BAs. Of course, I drank a few times here and there. I didn't do no drugs. I just didn't have no urge to. I didn't want to. But yeah, I would drink here and there, and I was on parole, and of course, my parole officer was probably like, "Oh, this guy."
Right.
No, but I try to stay focused. I try to keep myself going. I worked. I was paying off my restitution. I was doing all those things, Of course, I was in a relationship that helped me tremendously, I believe.
Yeah.
And there was still times where it like I would run into somebody, or there was people that I knew that was like, "Hey man, if you want, I could hook you up and you could to make some extra cash, And there was a time where, you know, I took a little step in that direction, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was short-lived. And part of that was just because both me and my wife were like, hey, you know, you don't need to be doing that. You need to just, and I was like, you know what, you're right. You know, why am I going to even, you know, and so I was just like, nah, we're good, man. And it just so happened right after that, the people that were telling me about that and doing that stuff ended up in prison.
Yeah.
You know, so it was just one of those situations, you know, there's always them, you know,
It's the devil still talking
oh, yeah,
to
you know.
you. Not willing to give you up that easy.
They don't want, and he still, you know, he doesn't want to give you up. That's the thing, you know. And he wants these young kids and he wants, you know what I mean? That's why it's so important for this message to get out there, you know what I mean? Because there's nothing fun in it.
Well, not to mention that, but I mean, you've beat the odds in like alcohol, you beat the odds in drugs. I mean, those two things are like the hardest things in the world to get past. You beat the odds of gangs, you beat the odds of places you shouldn't have been. Obviously, there's still a message that you need to share, and it's such an amazing feel-good story. We're gonna get to the point of the Bible study, but I'm still gonna save that for a little bit because I kind of want to go through that moment that you end up saying, okay, I'm walking the walk as good as I can, and I'm going to church.
Yeah, and this was just recently, you know.
Yeah.
Like I said, 2 years ago it was, and you know, both me and my wife had both been feeling it, you know, and she had her own reasons, and God was pulling her on her own and working with me on my own, you know what I mean? And it was just, she had brought it up a few times, you know, like, oh, we need to go to church. And I kind of just shrugged it off, you know, because at the time we would still go and drink and you know, to family's house and barbecue, and, you know, you have beers and, you know, one turns into 12 and more, and you know, it was them type of situations. And not to say that I wasn't out doing nothing dumb. We were all laughing and having a good time, but it just got to the point where I didn't want to do that no more. I just wasn't feeling it no more, you know. But the thing was, why I shrugged her off was just because I've always felt like if I'm going to live for God, I need to give him 100%. Like, I can't be half-stepping and be living as the world lives and then going to church on Sunday, Wednesdays, whenever church is, and acting like I'm good and praying to God, and then right back on Saturday, Friday night.
Which is 95% of the people that are in church. But yet they're seeing this guy with Oxnard printed on the back of his head, and he's probably the best one sitting in the pew. How crazy is it, right?
Well, you know, I don't want to consider myself the best one.
No,
you know,
I know none of us are the best one, but you know what I mean.
I just strive, and that's what I'm striving to be. You know, I'm striving to live for God and just give him 100%. And it's hard. It's a hard thing to do, and not because God isn't good. It's because the world at every turn is trying to pull you and drag you down and bring you back to where they would rather me be locked up. You know what I'm saying? They would rather me be that guy that I was, strung out on drugs and everything else. But that's not where I'm at, and that's not what I want.
I know, it's oh, man, I'm telling you, when I met you the first time, I'm like, oh, my God, I want the story. Because I just can't even fathom meeting a nicer guy, but I wouldn't have thought that in a convenience store when you were being that other guy.
No, you know, most people wouldn't have. You know, they would have looked at me and been like, you know, and like steered clear, or, you know, and, you know, it was that type of situation, which I'm not proud of, you know, because you catch them type of individuals here and there, and it's just like, man, that was me though.
Yeah.
You know.
And you're so humble now. That's the thing that's the beauty in the story for me is, man, you find God and your whole life just literally turns around, but yet with such wisdom, knowing that it's always out there trying to pull you in. Always, always, always. And I think so many people nowadays, they don't see that constant pull to the bad, constant pull to the things. I mean, we all suffer that. Every one of us suffer it. And yet, you know, you were able to overcome so much of that stuff, which is just absolutely amazing. The twist that ended up happening during the story, you brought your wife in on our kind of a pre-interview. And I thought this was the coolest thing ever. So we talk about Mom, and you know, Mom was always in the church, and she was doing a Bible study, and she was talking with your wife during a Bible study, and she said, I had met this guy. She had no idea it was you.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's like some crazy divine intervention.
It's a crazy story because, yeah, I didn't even know this at the time, you know, but my wife now was my pen pal, you know, that's how we met. You know, my Sally at the time, his wife was in jail with her, and, you know, it was like, hey, see if your wife has somebody I can write. And it ended up being her, you know, and we wrote, and, you know, we wrote throughout the rest of my sentence, and she got out, and she started doing good and got a job and everything, sent me money and was still writing me and everything. Then finally I got out. And I think it was like the day after I got out, the second day I was out, I called her, you know, hey, you know, and she's like, she got all surprised because it wasn't a collect call, you know.
Right.
But anyways, she comes over and we meet, and, you know, I tell my mom, hey, I'm going to leave, you know, and I kind of introduced her to my wife, which was my girlfriend at the time. And she's like, oh, okay. And you know, they both kind of looked at each other, and they didn't really say much. But when me and my girlfriend left, that's when she was like, I think I know her from somewhere. And I was like, oh, like where though? Like, where would you know her? And she was just like, oh, I'm not too sure, but I know her. And then, you know, it happened like the next time she had come to the house and she seen my mom, and then my mom was saying something about doing the jail ministry, you know, because that's what she did. And then she's like, oh my goodness, that's where I know her from.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
It's like, again, divine intervention just sneaking in all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just crazy. It's crazy how it all comes together like that.
And you've got children.
Yes.
And you even have stepchildren with her.
Yes.
And do you think if they listen to this podcast, they'll be pretty proud of the situation?
I think they might. You know, it's hard to say. I mean, I would hope they are.
Yeah.
You know, it's but you know, sometimes we create damage, you know, that's hard to fix, you know. But I hope that's, you know, my biggest thing and something that I pray for is that I could lead my children to God, and because I was a bad example for so long.
Yeah.
So now I'm only trying to be a good example, which it's only come about, you know, well, since I've been out, you know, I've showed them, okay, you got to work to earn things, you know what I mean? But living for God is a whole different ball game, you know what I mean?
Yeah, life changer.
Yeah.
Because we had talked, obviously, previously, too, about, you know, you had to ask for some forgiveness from the stuff you've done. And I think that's where, when a person starts to find God, they get a little bit of that freedom, right? Like, man, I have to repent for that stuff. I have to say, man, I'm sorry. You know, that was not who I am now. And I think that the unfortunate part in our society today is we do shut out people who've had a past. And even though most of us aren't clean, we tend to shut that past out, right?
Yeah.
And yet at the same token, when somebody can make this transformation, we want to celebrate them, right? Because we all are in knowledge that not only does this stuff exist, it's a beast. And when it grabs a hold of you, it doesn't want to let you go.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the saddest things, just how society is today, you know, with that, like you said, it's like everybody's quick to pick up and throw that first stone, you know.
Do you see it now? Like, if you walk in anywhere, do you feel like people are, like, looking at you differently?
As far as like what, like, oh man, look at this.
Yeah, because I think there is a look and a feeling inside that person. So the guy that you were then, skinny guy, I doubt you smiled as much.
Yeah, probably not.
Doubt you didn't have this same kind of, oh man, just positive energy. I bet it was a dirty, dark energy. And did people look at you different then than now that you got this vibrant type of energy? Can you feel it?
I do feel it. I mean, people don't take notice as much, and you know what I mean? They don't they don't avoid. You know what I'm saying?
Because it's the positive.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that talk. There's always somebody that asks me about the tattoo on my head. You know what I mean? I just run into everybody just ends up asking me. And a lot of people know Oxnard, California, and they're like, hey, I've been there. And a lot of times it's some little old lady or, you know what I mean? It's somebody you wouldn't expect. That's why sometimes my wife is like, I can't take you anywhere, But I run into all types, and it's just... I think the crazy thing is because you still run into individuals that kind of give you a look. Because I do still shave my head, and I've done it for so long. I don't like combing my hair, and I'm lazy with that. So I always keep it, shaved. But, I still always catch individuals kind of looking at me a certain way and trying to see if I'm going to look back or something, and it's just like, I don't give them that satisfaction of like, oh.
But I almost wonder, see, for me, and again, this is truth talks. We're just throwing out the truth. The very first moment that I met you, it was like, and kind of after I knew. Let's put it to the second time, after I knew, right? And I'm just like, oh my God, this puzzle piece doesn't work. Like, I don't see 1 ounce of bad bone in this guy, man. And that's how I knew I had to have this story, because I'm like, either there was some wicked crazy transformation, right? Like, you went from the devil, you got holy water hit you, and then all of a sudden you're the guy now.
Yeah.
Or it wasn't deep inside you. It was a product of the system. And it felt to me like it was a product of the system. And that's why I really wanted this story too, because I feel like so many youth, it's too easy to get caught up in it. Like, I never had that chance growing up. There was no gangs. There was nothing, right? I'm significantly older, but there just wasn't. And so my product, by just nature itself, was I would have really had to screw it up myself. Mm-hmm. I didn't have people helping me try and screw up my life. I would have had to have done it myself. And that's where I really wanted to go with this. But then also that person that takes the courage to leave that, a lot of times I'm thinking, man, there's only one way to get out, and you have to find it in Proverbs.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sit here and just blame a system, which of course there's a lot of systems that work against people and get people locked into certain things, and it's hard for them to get out, I've just always been one to own up to my own. I created the whole problem because I'm the one who chose to start hanging out with these individuals. Did I have to? No. But I did, just because, I think the problem is, and I think what happens sometimes is, as grown-ups, we don't know how to communicate with our kids,
Yeah.
And we don't, and that's where the problem comes, because then it's like kids don't know how to talk to the grown-ups either, you know what I mean, and say what they're really feeling, because they're like, the only thing they could think is maybe they're just going to get mad at me, so things don't get spoken. So where do you find, you go to the only outlet, and these other individuals that
going to give you bad advice.
Exactly.
Bad advice. We talked about that, which I think is incredibly respectful, but I asked you, I said, was the sentencing, was it fearful? And you said, I knew I had to own up to what I'd done. And I thought that was a really powerful impact. I think that was a really powerful statement, because I think then people want to blame everyone else, and that never solves the problem. It's, you got to look inside first. And that's a hard thing for people to do.
Well, yeah, and I think one of the things that makes me sad about society today is that there's no there's nobody taking responsibility for their actions, and there's nobody getting scolded or getting, there's nobody getting what they deserve. Everybody's just getting a slap on the wrist, like, oh, it's all right, don't worry about it, And the thing is nobody owns up to what they're doing. So now it's just like, oh, well, I can do whatever I want.
And it escalates.
Yeah, and it's escalated to what it is today, and it's a crazy, crazy world right now.
Yeah, it goes from pot to the angel dust, right? If there's no pot there, then the angel dust is what you do.
Well, yeah, there's always something more, and if there's not this, then there's that,
And I think that's a powerful message you just said there. I mean, that's super wickedly powerful, because it's like if there is no punishment for the crime is only going to get more and bigger. Is that your?
Well, my thing is like, there has to be something, right? You can't just keep. If I would have kept getting away with it, where would I be? Would I be here talking to you right now?
No,
probably not. I would still be an idiot doing all kinds of dumb stuff, but old, know,
right,
or dead. You know what I mean? So, it's real crazy. But I mean, I'm glad. And I'm thankful for my mother's prayers. I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I'm able to talk to you about this. And hopefully there's some people that'll listen and understand that, man, you don't have to, there are people out there that care, I kind of want to end these up in a couple things here, but I know that you are going to be doing your own podcast of some sort at some point. It's going to be faith-based. I think that's going to be wickedly powerful. That's going to be so powerful, man. We need it. We need it bad. The last thing, though, is what I want you to do right now, because there's going to be young kids watching or their parents watching that their kids are in trouble. Not too much trouble yet, but getting there. What would you say to them if a parent, say, I'm watching this, I want to take it to my kids, give my kids a message as to how to avoid exactly what happened? Well, I mean, the thing is, you got to watch out. Just be careful for that. There's always peer pressure in a certain sense. You know what I mean? You're always led by your peers. We're looking for somebody to follow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just be careful who you follow. You
Yeah.
know, because the fact of the matter is, like I told you before, what I believe is we're all followers. We all follow somebody, but the point is, who do we follow? Look up to the right people, man. And if you look up to the right people and you hang around the right people that are doing good and that are successful and that aren't always in trouble, you're gonna follow in their footsteps, and you'll become that person too. And if not like that person, at least sort of like that person, so you're not out getting in trouble, and don't idolize the person who's out there getting in trouble and thinking they're funny and doing all them type of things,
Because it leads to a bad path.
No, it leads to a bad path. It does,
And who's the ultimate we should follow?
Jesus Christ, for reals.
Yeah. Changed everything for you.
Yes.
Man, changes everything for everybody.
And it's not just for the kids. It's for, the growth. It starts with you and I.
Yeah.
If we're the ones that show our kids that we're living for God, what are they gonna do?
Yeah.
They're gonna follow us. And if you show them that, I promise they won't forget it. Because look at me, I never forgot all those years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even though I did things that I shouldn't have done, I always knew and I always felt. And
Yeah.
my mother's prayers always kept me.
What an incredible, incredible story, man. I tell you what, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing the story. I think it's going to help so many people. And again, I think, we'll get some flack with this. I know we will, but I don't care. I think the flack that comes is, that guy in that convenience store, I don't have to like him. That's not the guy. That's the guy I do got to look out for, because I'm protecting my family and doing what I need to do. And yet the blessing of all blessings is that same guy then is a guy that I really respect now and would have him anywhere that I wanted to be. And I think almost everybody, I can't say probably everybody, but I think almost everybody can go from here to there.
Oh yeah, there's always there's always the ability to change. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There is, and sometimes it might be harder for other individuals, but I promise you, if you put God first, other things become easier. It's just, I've seen too many things to know, you know what I mean? I've prayed too many prayers myself lately and seen them come to fruition. So, you know, there's not a doubt in my mind, you know, it's just for anybody that's walking on the wrong path and not so far in it right now, you know, just don't do it.
So, last question I'm going to ask you. You still have the tats on there? Do you keep them as a reminder?
The thing with tattoos, man, is like I started getting them, and then next thing I know, like everybody was getting them. So then I kind of just stopped getting them because I was like, well, everybody's getting them. So
does it kind of remind you where you don't want to go?
Well, I mean, kind of, but at this point right now in life, like I don't even recognize or like notice them anymore. You know what I'm saying? It takes you to notice them because you don't really know me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then it was like, hey, you know, you see my tattoos, you know, and I don't even realize it. You know what I mean? People still do look at your tattoos. You know, the only way I know it is because like, hey, does that hurt on your head? You know what I mean? But other than that, like I really don't even pay attention to them. You know what I'm saying? Like I just.
Well, all I can say is, God, it took me very, very few moments to realize that I wanted this story because it's so powerful, man. You are an incredible human being. And again, the blessing in that is the guy you were then, I probably wouldn't have liked or given 2 seconds to, you know. The guy you are now, I'm like, man, this is a guy that needs to be revered. His story needs to be out there, and he needs to have his own show talking about this stuff because that's how big of an impact and how, I guess it is that God works, right? Is that big things can happen and should happen. And I appreciate you being open and as honest as you have. Now, the piece of the puzzle does fit. It's just a different puzzle.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
It is so amazing. We're here at Truth Talks. The moment you get up and run, and we're going to help you do everything you can because your message is absolutely amazing. And again, I cannot appreciate you more for coming on, telling that story. And our whole mission is to help thousands, millions, whatever it is. But today, we made a change.
Awesome. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's amazing. I appreciate you,
Awesome.
brother. Appreciate you.